Yeah, you know, I hear that language about picking winners and losers, but it helps me think of ethanol, and we should pick that as a winner, for example. And we should pick wind as a winner, and we should choose our energy future. So I don't buy it that we shouldn't try to incentivize some particular industries. On the issue of taxes, you heard a 95% figure, but let's remember, I'm talking about incomes above $250,000, which would impact something like 1 or 2% of the population. If you want to defend those tax breaks for folks at the very top, including millionaires and billionaires, that makes it all the more likely that we've got to do things like privatize Medicare, which I think is a terrible idea, because if you want to talk dollars and cents, that Medicare proposal to privatize it and give you a voucher to cover your care would cost you an extra $6,400 out of pocket. Now, I don't know how many of you have that extra $6,400 laying around, but on that measure, especially in a state where we are an older population, that's a terrible idea for South Dakota.
Let's continue the debate on that question since we went there. Go ahead.
Well, I will just tell you that the entity that came out with the $6,400 has recently come out and said that there's no way that they can do that, run those numbers and come up with that number again. It's been proven false. They know that it's not true, and they've admitted it. You should read the Wall Street Journal because there's a good article in there that talks about the fact that Medicare is not going to be around in the future. I've got a 90-year-old grandma that depends on Medicare. I've got a mom that's going to soon be, in fact, she's here. She probably doesn't want to say me how soon that's going to be, and want me to say how soon it's going to be that she'll be on Medicare. But, you know, I would never do anything to harm the program. The changes that we're trying to implement to save the program will make sure that nothing changes for those 55 and above. Anybody younger than that, it's voluntary. You can either stay in traditional Medicare, or you can sign up for a subsidized policy that you pick out at your choosing. So it is something that is going to drive down the costs of health care. And when you look at the Obamacare bill and the health care bill that Matt supports, what that does is it takes all of our seniors' health care decisions out of their hands. It creates a board of 15 people that are going to be able to make all the decisions on whether you get the kind of treatment that you want, that you used to make with your doctor.
Quickly, we're getting close to the end here, so.
The phrase that stuck out of my ears right there was, Medicare's not going to be around anymore. I'll tell you, I'm in this race because we have to make sure that Medicare is around for all of us. $400 out-of-pocket cost, to my knowledge, comes from the Congressional Budget Office, and it relates to the first version of the Ryan budget that you voted for. There's a second version as well, but you supported the first one, and whether it's $6,400 or $6,500 or $6,300, that's all pretty bad for South Dakota, and I don't think that's the kind of proposal we should support. Now, in this race, I've tried to lay out in a positive way where I stand on these issues. My opponent says we can either let the program go broke or privatize it and end it. I say there's a third path, and that is to make adjustments and reforms to strengthen and preserve the program that has worked so well over all these years for South Dakota.
I want to get one more question here quickly.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. The health care bill that Matt supports takes $700 billion out of Medicare and uses it to fund, it does. It does. The absolute fact is that it uses it to fund the new entitlement program in the health care bill. Every dollar that is saved is plugged right back into Medicare through the plan that I support. I believe every dollar needs to be put back in to restore that program. And I don't believe that Medicare should be used as a piggy bank to pay for a new entitlement program that this president has championed and that Matt has said he supports.
Okay, let's move on. We've got another ag question, and we're getting close to our wrap-up here, but we have a good one here to finish. This one for Mr. Varilek. The agriculture, obviously a huge part of South Dakota's economy. How do we promote youth to stay on family farms?
Well, that's important to me as a young person and as someone who would like to see more people in my generation be able to get into this business. Agriculture is not just part of our economy. It's not just a huge part of our economy. It's part of our heritage. And on the other end of the age spectrum, I think back to my grandpa, who was born in a farmhouse in rural Yankton County something like 90 years ago, and he's lived in that same house every year of his life, because when he got to the age where he could run the show, he took it over from his dad, and he's lived there every day. And that's just one example of the kind of connections that we have to the land here in South Dakota. One of the ways we can do that is to try to pass the Farm Bill with all the provisions we just talked about to make sure this is a business where you can actually make a living. And one feature in particular is the Beginning Farmer and Rancher program, which is designed to help people be able to get into this business. But it all comes back to, if we don't pass a farm bill, if we have this kind of uncertainty, if we have a huge drought that's going to knock a lot of people out, then it becomes a much less attractive business to get into, and we're going to see that average age of farmer keep on creeping upward, which we want to try to roll back. Thank you.
Congresswoman, keeping youth and family farming.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing we need to do is when the Department of Labor comes out with a regulation that says that our kids aren't going to be able to work on our family farms anymore, we need to go to war with that. And we did here in South Dakota. We were loud, we were vocal, we pushed back on that, and we got them to stop from implementing that. We are proud of the fact that I grew up working alongside my mom and dad, that I saw them work. I was a good kid because I was with them 90% of the time, picking rocks and working cows and making sure that our family farm survived as a family. And so when we see regulations come out of an administration that doesn't know how farming works, we need to push back on that. You know, we recently had OSHA put out some regulations on sweep augers. I had to explain to some people in the administration what a sweep auger was. They'd never seen one. They didn't know. They were writing regulations for a piece of equipment that we use every day on the farm that they didn't even understand how it worked or the fact that we needed to have a hands-on in that situation. The second thing that we can do is that we have to eliminate the death tax. We can't pass on our farms to our kids if we are having it taken away from the federal government to fund their overspending and wasting of taxpayer dollars. So we need to not continue with a death tax that penalizes those who are out there on the land. We also do need to support the Beginning Farmer program. I've heard all kinds of success stories of people who are able to utilize that program to get onto their first quarter of land or to buy a few cows, and I think it's a great way to go. But the last thing that we really need to focus on is certainty. We have to have certainty and show our kids that we believe they have a future on the farm, that they have farm policy that's stable and gets done on time, that we have tax policy that works for them and makes sure it's not going to take their income before they can feed their family. So certainty is very key as we work together to make sure that our kids are going to stay on our farms.
Okay, thank you. We've come to the end of the questions. We appreciate that. The hour has gone by quickly, and by agreement now we'll get some closing comments from our participants, and by agreement Congresswoman Noem can go first. Congresswoman, thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the good discussion that we've had and all of you for taking part in that. Again, thank you to the corn growers, to Matt and to Jerry, and for everybody listening on the radio today as well. There were several accusations that were thrown out during this debate. A couple of them I want to address right now. There was some discussion about my attendance at Ag Committee, and I'll tell you that I've shown up every single day for South Dakota agriculture. One of the things that I want to point out is that when I was working cows and working on the farm and doing all of that, I was gaining an insight that became so valuable on that Ag Committee. Now, when it comes to the accusations, I've proven I was at many of the meetings that Matt says that I missed. If I wasn't there, I was in another committee voting or working on legislation that was important to South Dakota or meeting with South Dakotans. I serve on 3 committees and 9 subcommittees. Many days, there's several committee meetings going on at the same time. I know that he will criticize me for not talking enough in committee. Every good speech isn't given in front of a camera. And I have championed the fact that I have educated a lot of members on agriculture that didn't know anything about it. That I got all 3 of my provisions included into the chairman's mark of the Farm Bill, which was a wonderful victory, meaning that it wasn't going to have opposition in committee. In committee, I championed 3 other amendments that were accepted and put in. People looked to me because they knew I understood agriculture, they knew that I lived it, they knew if they had a question they could come to me. And that's why we're going to fight to get a farm bill that's good for South Dakota. You can make things up and say them a whole lot, but that doesn't make them true. And you elected me to tell you the truth, and Americans deserve to hear the truth. Listen, folks, Ronald Reagan said, freedom isn't more than 1 generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our kids in the bloodstream. It has to be fought for, protected, in order for us to pass it on and for them to do the same. And I believe that. We've got 2 very different philosophies about the federal government's role in your life and what it should be. I believe you make better decisions than the federal government does. I believe that D.C. is a wreck. We've got too many people out there who've spent too much time playing political games and making accusations and trying to divert conversations onto false manufactured issues instead of talking about policy that really matters to people. And so that's what I appreciate about the good people that we have here in South Dakota, is we can talk about what's important. We can talk about the debt we have. We can talk about our farm policy that works. We can talk about regulations that we need relief from. I truly believe that we need a country where we don't send more of our money to Washington, D.C. and let them waste it. We don't have a taxing problem in this country. We have a spending problem. And we need to identify our priorities and make sure that they go that way. I will tell you, I love South Dakota. It's running in my veins, and I pray every day that God will bless all of you and your families, that God will bless South Dakota, and God bless the United States. Have a wonderful day at Dakotafest.
Thank you, Congresswoman Knight. Thank you. Mr. Varilek, go ahead, your closing comments.
Thank you again, Jerry, and to everyone for organizing, and thanks again to my opponent. I think this has been a great opportunity for us to share our views on a lot of important issues, and I'd like to do it as many times as we can in the remaining months of this campaign. I'm proud of my roots in rural South Dakota. I'm proud of my experience working with small business owners, washing dishes, and delivering pizzas and all those kinds of things. I'm happy to know that we're fellow rock pickers, and that I've had good experiences doing those things and walking bean fields. And all those experiences, including those with Senator Tim Johnson, taught me about the value of hard work. And again, I'm in this race to be a voice for middle-class folks who work hard, because right now Washington is rigged to serve somebody else. I'm going to try to tip the balance back in favor of working and middle-class people here in South Dakota. The other reason I'm in this race is because I am also tired of the dysfunction in Washington, the my way or the highway attitude that's only become more common since the last election. I think we need a more constructive approach where we are willing to work with others if it's in the interest of our state and our country. Because we have issues facing this country that we all care about, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, and I will bring that constructive approach. Right now, the my way or the highway attitude has delivered us this farm bill situation where it is stalled, where the House won't bring it up for a vote, and unfortunately, my opponent told us that she would have more influence in being able to support results for South Dakota because of her leadership role, but in fact, it's been the opposite. She hasn't been able to convince them to bring it up for a vote. She hasn't been able to convince the fellow Tea Party group to support the bill. Consequently, we're in a situation where you're facing a drought, and the politicians are home campaigning for their re-elections. I think we've got to do better than that. I want to close today with a story from a meeting that I went to recently. I was talking to a guy and he said, "How's the campaign going?" He said, "How do you spend your time these days, and do you actually enjoy this?" I said, "Well, actually I do. It's great. I get to go to every county fair you can think of. I can eat all the fried food that my budget can afford. I get to go to parades and powwows all over South Dakota and listen to people and hear what's on their minds and talk about my vision for the future as well." I said, "I'm having a great time." He listened politely and then he paused and he looked at me and he said, "That sounds terrible. I would not want to put all those miles in my car and do all those things just for the honor of joining one of the least popular, least effective institutions in all of America." He said, "What the heck is wrong with you?" Well, it's fair to ask, why would you want to join this institution? But I'll tell you what. It's because I believe we can still do better. I believe we don't have to put up with this gridlock and dysfunction. I believe we can make progress on the issues that we all care about as Americans. And we can do those things if we elect the right kind of people. People focused on the middle class, people focused on working together, people focused on working hard and doing everything they can to make a brighter tomorrow for people in this state. That's the kind of leadership you deserve. That's the kind of leadership we've had in the past. And that's the kind of leader I will be. Thank you very much.